Hotline Miami is a complicated thing to talk about. Hotline Miami is a complicated game to talk about. It's already 12 years old at this point, and I think every YouTube channel I've ever seen has already discussed this game. And you've probably already seen those videos if you're here. Hotline Miami itself barely has a story. In fact, I think there's moments I think the story in general is a retcon. And Hotline Miami 2 is one of the most overcomplicated narratives I've maybe ever seen, but maybe better than the first game. And I know, my previous video was essentially gatekeeping someone out of Hotline Miami. But I don't want to act like I'm the authority of this game. I don't want to act like I know everything about it, like I know the developer's intentions, or that I'm actually more smarter than anyone else. I am often wrong, and there will be things that you probably don't agree with. These games are vague, as I mentioned, and a lot of it is up to your own interpretation. Hell, even the first game basically has two major ways you can view it. What I'm trying to say is, this is my own thing. Hotline Miami sees the player take on the role of Jacket, an unnamed character who never speaks and receives near daily calls leading him to buildings full of Russian mobmen. Upon arriving, you will then partake in a short, hectic, frantic mission of killing everyone there and hopefully not dying more than like 60 times. Upon beating the level, you'll be transported via cutscene to various small shops, VHS stores, rental stores, pizza delivery places, convenience stores, all worked by the same friendly face, Beard, where everything is free and on the house to the player. There are 19 missions, all separated into 5 different chapters that all have a somewhat complete narrative arc. There's Don Juan, the girlfriend of the main character with a horse mask. There is Richard, the main character with his iconic chicken mask. And Rasmus, a Russian mobman with the Rasmus mask. Don Juan seems to care for the player, Rasmus seems to hate the player, and Richard seems to be curious about the player and almost taunt the player. These missions are really the first hint at some frame story inside Hotline Miami. Richard seems to almost taunt the player, telling him that he needs to wake up and remember when they first met right before the game starts, with where they first met being when he first received the Richard mask. Throughout the game, Richard is constantly trying to get you to ask questions. Questions about what's going on, why you're in these situations, and consistently, Jacket doesn't answer them, until eventually, he never will be able to answer them. Chapter 1 starts with Jacket's very first mission. He gets his phone call, he gets his first mask, the Richard mask, and he goes out and kills a bunch of Russian mobmen. Grabs a briefcase, stashes it in a dumpster, kills a homeless guy, pukes, drives back home. Day's complete. There isn't really much that happens throughout this chapter, but if you do have a keen eye, you can find a very important bright pink flyer in Jacket's apartment. Jacket's apartment is actually subtly changing all throughout the game to kind of reflect what's happening in his life. But as most people will probably not find out on their first playthrough, myself included, a lot of these little documents that float around actually contain a story, and very important parts of the story that the game never tells you outside of these floating documents. This bright pink flyer is honestly one of the most important collectibles you can find. It seems to be a recruitment flyer for something called the 50 Blessings organization. Outside of this flyer, you don't really hear much in the game about 50 Blessings, but they seem to be a patriotic organization for true American patriots, and Jacket seems to have signed up. And if you miss this on this level, you don't get it again. And I don't want to exaggerate, but it's quite literally the key to understanding this whole game. This chapter is really a simple one. You go from apartments to buildings to office spaces, all just blowing the brains out of Russian mobsters. The only noticeable thing between the first mission and the last mission is you can find the drive jacket on the floor. So that's cool. But the final mission of this chapter is maybe one of the most important missions in the whole game. The final mission revolves around you going into a building filled with Russian mobsters, killing all of them before you get your first boss fight against I don't want to say fat black guy, but he's a fat black guy. Batman. After you kill him and gorge his eyeballs out with your thumbs, you rescue Girlfriend, one of the few characters really in this story, and you carry her outside to your car, and she's here for the rest of the game. Why are we having this conversation? Where are you right now? Who's leaving you messages on your answering machine? And most importantly, and most famously, get ready to clap, do you like hurting other people? The first 3 questions are directed towards Jacket. But the last question, I really do think, is asked towards the player. It's asking you why you like hurting other people. Hotline Miami is a violent game, and you've already made it about halfway through at this point, so obviously there's something you like here. And I really think the thesis of Hotline Miami is asking, why do you like violence? Whether it's real, fictional, whatever, why are you there for it? After this, Chapter 2 continues as normal. This is probably the best era of Hotline Miami for Jacket. Over this little chapter, you'll start to notice the apartment gets cleaner and cleaner with the help of Girlfriend actually making Jacket not live like a bum. And pretty much weekly, Jacket is getting a phone call, going out to a building filled with Russian mobsters, and killing them all. That is until Neighbors. Neighbors is probably the most complicated, convoluted, and confusing mission to talk about in Hotline Miami. Not necessarily because of right now, but because of what happens at the end of the game. The mission starts like all others. You get a call on your answering machine, you go out to a building full of Russian people, kill them all, but at the very end of the mission, the building you are standing in the very room you're standing in, gets a phone call. It's the same organization asking you to go to a telephone company to solve a problem, which implies a few things. Whoever is leaving you these messages is watching you carefully enough to not only know the building you're in, the room you're in, but the phone number to the exact room you are already in, which implies a high level of surveillance over everything. Not only that, but Jacket already just finished a mission of killing, I don't know, like 50 people, and they're already calling on him again in the same night for what seems to be a very serious issue. To me, this implies that Jacket is not just the closest person, but to me implies that Jacket is one of their best killers to send. But know for right now that this mission is a very important thing for whoever's leaving these messages. When Jacket finally makes it to the phone company, phone home, yeah, it's an ET reference. The whole building is littered with dead bodies, all the way up to the 2nd floor. When you get there, you finally find another very important character to Hotline Miami, Biker. This will be your 2nd boss fight, and maybe the hardest boss fight. When you enter the room, you see Biker, who seems to be working on a computer in the company room. We don't know what he's doing, but he wants you dead the moment he sees you. It's a lot of circling around each other, being careful with how you move, and making sure you land attacks in the few opportunities you get to land them. After you beat Biker, right before you kill him, his final words are, "I was so close." Let's put a pin in that and move on with the rest of Jacket's story. Part 3 is maybe the quickest part we can discuss. Visitations. This is pretty much where everything starts to go downhill. Jacket seems to be hallucinating images of people he's killed, talking to dead corpses, and most importantly, anytime he goes out for a sweet little treat at a convenience store, Beard's dead, replaced by someone preparing a firearm who does not seem to like Jacket. The chapter ends with, unbeknownst to him, Jacket's final mission for whoever's leaving him these messages. Part 4 begins with probably the most important cutscene in the whole game, if I haven't already said that before. When Jacket arrives home from his last mission, he walks upstairs and he sees girlfriend lying dead on the bathroom floor, spent casings in the living room, and a man in a rat mask sitting on his couch. He informs us that this is nothing personal before shooting Jacket dead in his own living room. You were given the prompt to press R or A or X, whatever button you've probably pressed a million times before, to respawn. Once you respawn, you are standing over your own dead body with Richard sitting on your couch. Richard seems to shift in tone, no longer wanting you to find answers, but informing you that at this point, it's too late. Jacket will never find his answers. He will never understand why he's doing the things he is. And more importantly, it's all his own fault. And to me, that summarizes Jacket to a T. Starting a quest for vengeance on the wrong people. The final chapter in Hotline Miami starts with the worst mission in the game, Trauma. This game, all about quick-paced violence, respawning quickly, beating the shit out of everyone, blood and gore everywhere, is now a stealth game. You wake up in a hospital bed, realizing that all of this has been a coma dream, recovering from the gunshots you suffered. Police want to take you in for questioning to solve any of the cases you're involved with, but they're waiting for you to recover. Upon waking up, you go for your last escape. Crawling out a window, barely able to move in a straight line, and nearly passing out if you move more than 6 steps. This mission is hard. If anyone even sees you, you're dead. You can't kill anyone, you just have to avoid everyone. And more importantly, you can't walk in a straight line for more than 3 steps before you collapse. Hotline Miami is all about quick kills, combos, shooting people in the face with a shotgun. This mission takes all of that and throws it out the window. This is no longer your power fantasy. All you can do is escape. After Trauma, which is my least favorite mission, you get my favorite mission. It's a good way to make up for it, I suppose. Assault. Jacket realizes that any answer he might get will come from the police reports about himself. So he wages a one-man war on the entire Miami police station. This mission has more enemies than any other mission in the game, and in fact, it's known for crashing the game. It is so hectic and busy. After killing what feels like hundreds of police officers, eventually you get another boss fight on the 3rd floor between the police commissioner and another 70 or so police officers. After you kill the police commissioner, you go to the reason you're even here. Richter sits in the jail cell. And once you talk to him, he's surprisingly at ease. He completely understands that you want to kill him. He doesn't even really fight you back. He just kind of asks that you don't, and he's pretty polite about it. He tells you he doesn't know anything that's going on, that he doesn't know why he was told to kill you, and he doesn't know anything about you. He just keeps getting strange messages on his answering machine. But he suggests maybe reading the police report for any evidence. While I love this mission, it does point out something I want to mention. Jacket's an idiot. We can all agree with that. He realizes that the person who was sent to kill him was sent by random messages on the answering machine, reads the police report, and sees that the messages are coming from a Russian mobster hotspot. While it might not seem to make any sense if you know the full picture of Hotline Miami, Jacket seems to believe the Russian mobsters convinced Richter to go to his apartment in an animal mask and kill him as some type of taunting victory, killed by the same way he killed all of theirs. Or at least that's what I assume. Or Jacket's an idiot. You decide. After you read the police report, you get the only choice you can ever make with Jacket. If you go back to kill Richter or not. You can spare him or strangle him to death. While in Hotline Miami, the choice doesn't really matter. It's entirely for the player. In Hotline Miami 2, we get the answer to what Jacket chose. The next mission starts with you going to the Golden Truck Stop, the club where the calls were going to Richter. Upon, guess what, killing probably 100 Russian mobsters, you find the club owner who reveals that he doesn't know anything that's happening and that the mobsters just happen to be here, but after threatening him and then killing him. You find out where his boss lives. The next mission is the only mission in the game that continues immediately after. There is no apartment break after this. Upon reaching him, he quickly realizes who you are, the person who's killed hundreds of his men, probably 1,000 at this point. First, you have to kill his neon pink panthers, and then you have to kill his hot ninja bodyguard, which is never addressed again. But then you kill him, in probably the quickest boss fight in the whole game. Upon blowing off both his arms with ninja stars, I'm not making this up, he shoots himself in the head so you don't get the final kill. All until his phone starts ringing. After answering the call, you take the elevator to wherever he is, and you find him sitting in a wheelchair. An old Russian man who really just seems sick of your shit. He realizes you're the guy who's been killing all of his men, and honestly, it doesn't seem like he even gives a shit. He asks you to just make it quick. You shoot him with the same gun his son killed himself with, and you walk off to the balcony. You throw the chicken mask off and take a strange, mysterious object out of your pocket and throw it off the balcony. Hotline Miami is over, and I have so many questions. Jacket's story is very much up to interpretation. Everything is extremely vague. Jacket never talks. He has almost no personality, and there's thousands of breadcrumbs that seem to go nowhere. Who are the three figures in the void-like room? Who's the guy who's giving you free shit at every place you go to? Why did someone else in an animal mask shoot you? What was Girlfriend even doing in this room? What's this weird symbol that keeps appearing everywhere, and who are these janitors that the game seems to make a point about? All of these questions aren't really answered in Jacket's story. All throughout the game, Richard is constantly asking Jacket to finally ask some questions, and he never does. Jacket's story ends confused and unanswered, but Hotline Miami is not over yet. The final chapter of Hotline Miami is called Answers. In it, you play as Biker, the person you kill on Neighbors. His first cutscene is him interrogating Aubrey, the person who wears the pig mask. He informs him that whatever organization he signed up for that keeps leaving him messages on his answering machine is getting born. He's killing all of these people, but he doesn't really get anything out of it. And it seems like they're starting to threaten him now that he's not doing anything for him. Aubrey informs him that there's really no way out, but he knows a few secrets about the organization, leading you to go to the Blue Dragon Chinese restaurant and investigate the person sending you messages. Upon clearing out the restaurant, you find a phone developer, and he tells you, while he doesn't know what's happening, he knows where the messages are actually coming from, a place called Phone Home. Upon starting the next mission, you're taken to Phone Home. You walk in, you get to choose if you leave the building littered with dead bodies or not, and you start hacking their mainframe, getting ready to find out all of their secrets, right before Jacket walks in. And this time, right when he rushes in to grab his golf club, the very same golf club he used to beat your skull in, you kill him. Remember that pin we put in this? This mission was very divisive when it came out. A lot of people saw this as different interpreting stories, different timelines, what-if scenarios. To me and Hotline Miami 1, viewed in a vacuum, these are two alternate things. There is a timeline where Jacket kills Biker and nothing is answered, and there's a timeline where Biker kills Jacket and everything is answered. Upon killing Jacket, you finish hacking the mainframe, and you find out again where the phone calls are actually coming from. Upon arriving to a random house outside Miami, you can see the janitors, two figures who seem to be haunting Jacket. You walk in, find a computer system leading into a sewer, and presumably can't hack the mainframe on this one. You walk into the sewer grate, talk to the janitors, and they inform you that it's all been a game. If you do not hack the computer upstairs, the janitors are very meta about this conversation, referring to everything as a game, telling you that the game's over now and you were just a pawn, asking you if you enjoyed it, and informing you that this organization was done by just two people. This is very much a reference towards Hotline Miami itself, a game famous for being developed by only two people. The janitors look shockingly like the actual two developers of the game. This is 100% a stand-in. If you do not solve the computer puzzle, you are asked, "Did you like Hotline Miami?" And that's the ending. But if you go back and play every mission as Jacket and find, I shit you not, a pixel on every single stage, you can find the secret password, born in the USA, and hack the computer upstairs. Where the ending goes from a meta joke asking you if you thought the game was good or not, to a exposition lore dump. You learn everything about 50 Blessings, an organization that was led by patriots of America after the Russo-American Collaboration Act, after the Hawaiian conflict that ended with nukes dropping on San Francisco. You learn that 50 Blessings is really a patriotic movement of veterans uptaking the role that Americans should rightfully have. This goes from a joking meta ending to the explanation to everything in the whole game. The chapter name is Answers, and it really does give you all of the answers right here. And for a while, a lot of people viewed this as the joke ending. You have to go around collecting 19 magic floating pixels, all to be given a lore dump that no one really cares about at this point. But with that, Hotline Miami was done. You maybe understand anything about the Russo-American collaboration. You understand that an organization called 50 Blessings is the people behind the phone calls. You understand that something is allowing Russians to be all over Miami, and some people are pissed about it. But to say Hotline Miami is a game about the story might be a bit of an understatement. Hotline Miami is a game about games. It asks what's important in a game, a story or good gameplay. But on a thematic side of it, Hotline Miami asks you how violence affects games. Obviously, if you've made it this far in Hotline Miami, you have to like violence to some degree. And it asks you, why? Is there a separation between violence and media? Is there a separation between violence for a good reason or a bad reason? It asks you if violence is reasonable at all. And it doesn't give you an answer. It lets you ask yourself that, and hopefully you come up with a good answer. But as time will show, I don't think Dinaton was happy with what they saw. Hotline Miami was an overnight success. It really skyrocketed the career of Dinaton Games, going from two nobodies to overnight rock stars, at least in the indie game scene. Devolver Digital, who published the game, is probably the most prominent indie publisher of all time, really. And I think a lot of that is still in part due to Hotline Miami. Hell, when they had their anniversary post, Jacket was front and center on it. But not everyone was celebrating the success of Hotline Miami. Dinaton Games seemed to be rather upset by it almost. The hard part about making art is once you make it, it's not really yours anymore after you release it. People are going to see what they want out of a product and, more importantly, infer things that maybe you didn't intend to. And when you get a product that's as vague and metaphorical as Hotline Miami, well, a lot of people are going to bring a lot to it and take away things that you did not intend. It's a game that naturally attracts people who like violence. You kill roughly 2 people per second in Hotline Miami. That starts to be a selling point after a while. So when your game's message is basically violence bad, but your main selling point is you get to kill a shit ton of people, people tend to get lost in the metaphor. And I can't blame them. After 3 years of development, in 2015, Hotline Miami 2, Wrong Number, was released to mixed reviews. And I can't blame people. Hell, when this game came out, I really hated it. It takes a lot of the core elements of Hotline Miami and kind of ruins them in a way. The tight, compact levels that encouraged you to die over and over again are replaced with huge, sprawling mazes sometimes where I want to say at least a third of my deaths in Hotline Miami 2 come from someone I can't even see on screen shooting me. The missions all are extremely long, sometimes taking up to like 40 minutes. And when you're 20 minutes into a mission, dying doesn't feel like it doesn't matter. It matters a lot, and especially on your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 20th attempt, it starts to suck to die. And more importantly, Jacket's not really in it. You don't play as the guy. He doesn't have any dialogue. He's a background piece, not even a background character. A lot of people wrote Wrong Number off. It just seemed like a sequel that went bigger for no reason and really ruined the vague metaphor of Hotline Miami. Everything has a reason. In Hotline Miami 1, you really don't need to know the story at all. Sometimes it feels like a hindrance to even find out the story. In Wrong Number, you find out the story immediately. Wrong Number is hard to talk about. It's overly complicated. There's about 4 different timelines that happen in the game. It takes place both before Hotline Miami 1, during Hotline Miami, and after Hotline Miami, in a non-chronological order, has 12 playable characters and 8 different story arcs, all separated into 6 different acts, each containing 4 missions. Explaining this game's narrative alone would take forever. But to me, the narrative isn't as important as the character arcs and what the characters are trying to say. And more importantly, my actual relationship with Hotline Miami 2 has changed nearly every time I played it. I've gone from hating it to thinking it's okay to thinking I like it more than Hotline Miami 1. And as of right now, I still do like it better than Hotline 1. All this to say, this video took so long because I didn't know the best way to talk about this. But before we start, let's do a quick preference on the world of Hotline Miami. In 1985, the Cold War escalated, and Russia and America's war actually started. It was mostly based around Hawaii, where many US soldiers, including Jacket and Beard from the first game, were stationed. The war eventually ended with the nuking of San Francisco and the creation of the Russo-American Coalition. After San Francisco, the war was considered too far, and peace needed to be established. This coalition was to let immigrants of Russia in and stop the war completely. If you haven't noticed by now, Hotline Miami is an alternate timeline. It's not close to ours at all. Eventually, the organization 50 Blessings was formed under the guise of a patriotic movement, a movement that did not like the Russo-American Coalition and thought America was better off on its own. 50 Blessings would eventually recruit people like Jacket and Jake and Richter to form hitmen, essentially, going into known Russian mobster places and killing everyone they could until eventually the Russian mob organization was completely crumbled. At the end of Hotline Miami 1, Jacket is eventually arrested and put under police investigation and stands trial. This is where Hotline Miami 2 starts. The characters of Hotline Miami all engage in violence, obviously. And I think Hotline Miami 2 is questioning the participation in violence. No longer is it about, do you like hurting other people? The answer is obvious. Yes, you do. You're here for the sequel. But it's supposed to question why you came back, why you are still acting in this game. And each character reflects that. Martin Brown is the first playable character. Martin is an actor who's filling the role of the Midnight Massacre, or the Animal Killer, a movie about Jacket. Throughout it, you quickly notice that this is an exaggerated story. It's much more violent. Girlfriend is now a victim of Jacket, and it seems all about their twisted version of a relationship. But Martin seems to enjoy this role. While a lot of people think it's beneath him as a near Oscar-awarded actor, he is happy to be in this B-rated slasher. It's something he's always wanted to do. He's always wanted to kill people. During an interview, he maybe accidentally let it slip that all he wants to do is hurt other people. But it doesn't matter. It's a film. It's not real. Martin represents people obsessed with violence in media, questioning whether it's good or not because it is fake. While this is maybe the most contentious view I think Wrong Number has, It's, in my opinion, what it's going for. Martin's excuse is that he fulfills his fantasies in media. He's not actually hurting anyone. But if you still want to do it and you live out that excuse in a fictional world, is that any better? The fans are fans of Jacket. They admire everything he did, thinks he's a hero, and more importantly, want to be like him. While the metaphor is slightly on the nose, I like it a lot. Fans of the first game. But more importantly, all of these fans participate in violence because they think it's cool. They want to be like Jacket. Going around, killing hundreds of people and walking out of a room looks cool in a fictional world. They think the thought of being action heroes is heroic and cool looking, when really all they are capable of is killing and hurting people. Even in the mission that's a parody of rescuing Girlfriend, you find out that they just killed someone's entire friend group and then left them alone in a closet. I think how they die is most telling. In their biggest heist, walking into the last remnants of the Russian mob, they nearly kill everyone with the help of the Russian mob's own boss. But eventually, everything starts to turn and they're picked off one by one until Tony is the only person left standing. While completely alone, surrounded by his own dead friends, he starts begging for mercy, cowering alone in a room before killed. These people don't have any moralistic values. They don't believe in anything. They just think it looks cool. And the moment push comes to shove, they don't want to do it anymore. Jake is a member of the 50 Blessings organization, set during the time of Hotline Miami 1. Unlike most characters in Hotline Miami and Wrong Number, Jake is just racist. He does not like anyone who isn't an American proud citizen. He is covered head to toe in Confederate flags and just doesn't like Russian people. That's it. He just is racist. I think there's a reason Jake only gets a handful of levels and is played only for a joke, really. Hotline Miami and Wrong Number seem to have respect for characters they find morally reprehensible. Jacket is given a relatively straightforward ending and is given quite a bit of respect. Biker's given respect. Jake is only played for jokes and is played entirely as an asshole. There's not a single person who interacts with him that walks away happy. And I do think Jake represents a small section of the player base of Hotline Miami. People who walked away thinking, yeah, killing Russians is awesome, and saw it as some white nationalist movement. Well, obviously, this wasn't everyone. Jake does represent something, at least that the developers saw. Jake participates in violence on a purely xenophobic motive. Manny Pardo. Manny Pardo is a detective in Miami. While working several different cases and murdering every suspect he might possibly have, he constantly shows a disgust towards the Midnight Massacre or the Miami Mutilator, essentially Jacket. While detective by day, by night he serves as a secret serial killer, trying to gain fame and notoriety all through his twisted and dark killings. The only problem is no one really cares. Jacket has all of the headlines wrapped up about himself, and his killings seem to be a little bit boring in comparison. One murder really doesn't compare anything to hundreds of Russians killed in one night. Manny kills for fame. It's as straightforward as that. Though he doesn't want it in his own name, he wants to be just as famous as Jacket, talked about by everyone. He wants people to write books about him. But no one will. The Henchman is maybe the simplest character of all. I mean, he has 2 levels. There's not much to read into. He's a Russian mobster who works almost directly for the Sun. He kills for money. Hell, his whole character arc is about him finding a giant duffel bag full of cash. The game makes it clear that killing for money is not going to get you anywhere. Of his 2 levels, his first level involves finding money. His second level is getting robbed by his girlfriend and dying. This is editor Simon here, and since I've been editing and working on this video for what feels like way too long, this was kind of like my least favorite part, was right about the Henchman, and I feel like I didn't do it justice. Yes, money plays an important part in the Henchman, but I feel like it's more complicated than just killing for money. The Henchman only has like 2 or 3 missions, if I recall off the top of my head, and even though he's not in the game much, he actually has a pretty significant impact to all of the characters around him. He really fleshes out like what the typical Russian henchman that you've killed hundreds and hundreds of is like. Quite literally, he gives a face to the average person you kill and don't ever really think about. And I feel like that's most of what he's in the game for. His story is really more about trying to get out. From the moment you meet him, he doesn't seem content in the lifestyle of just being a Russian henchman. And it's all about him trying to escape that. The bag of money he gets is really more of the opportunity to leave, more so than it is actual money, if that makes sense. And the reason he ends up dying is because his girlfriend ends up stealing the money so she can get away instead. And he ends up staying a Russian henchman and dies at the hands of the fans in a rather graphic cutscene. And I think it goes to show that this is a lot more of a complicated character than I originally gave credit for. And that his violence is really to try to secure himself a better life. But at the end of the day, violence is never going to break yourself out of more violence. And more importantly, it makes you reflect on the graphic way at which you kill these people all throughout the first and second game, and that they kind of have their own lives as well and might be trying to get out of this. So back to me from like 7 months ago being an idiot. Goodbye. The son is the son of the Russian mob boss in the first game. He was left with a broken mob organization and 2 dead relatives. His entire character arc is about trying to rebuild what he was given. Every mission he has is trying to rebuild the Russian organization. He kills not for his own pride or for money or fame or drugs. He kills trying to rebuild a legacy. And he knows constantly that he will never reach the height his parents had. The son is the final mission in the game. After he's finally rebuilt his organization to the best of his abilities, his last mission is a drug-fueled trip all throughout his own base, while he kills hundreds of his own Russian mobsters, all while at the same time, the fans are killing his own Russian mobsters. Eventually, you have a boss fight with every single one of the fans, killing all but Tony. And the final fight between the 2 swans and what appears to be a strange swan-dragon hybrid thing, you eventually walk off into what seems to be Valhalla, jumping off the building and dying, splatting on the ground. The son always knew his legacy would not be rebuilt, and that killing was not going to be the only thing to rebuild it. But I think it was the only thing he was capable of doing. Evan Wright is the only character in Hotline Miami 1 or 2 that naturally avoids violence. He can't kill people naturally. The only way he can kill is if you purposely make him go into some rage-like state. But until then, if he picks up a gun, he disarms it. If he picks up a bat and uses it on someone, he knocks them out. He won't kill unless you provoke him to. Naturally, you would think that this would be a perfectly morally fine character. His biggest flaw is his obsession with Jacket. He wants to write a world-famous book on the actual real facts that happened. And while he really is the only character who finds out anything close to the truth of the case, he's punished for it. He's constantly putting his life and his family's well-being at stake, trying to get riskier and riskier interviews, spending money on interviews that his family desperately needs, all trying to get the real case. to get the truth out or to get his own fame is up to interpretation. He's the only character who also has multiple endings. In one ending, you can choose to finish the book and abandon your family in some motel. Or you can abandon your book and spend your last moments with your family. Either way, eventually, nukes will go off and kill you regardless. It's just depending on if you want to spend your last moments alone or with loved ones. To most people's surprise, one of the playable characters in Wrong Number is Beard, the same convenience store worker you see all throughout Hotline 1. During this time period, you play in 1985 during the Hawaiian-Russian conflict, serving as a soldier alongside Jacket. He partakes in what is essentially a suicide squad, destined to die and seemingly expendable at every single angle. All of his missions take place back to back and keep getting riskier and riskier until eventually his commander snaps. One night, while they receive their last orders that seem to be a suicide mission, the commander walks in covered in blood and wearing the skin of an animal, a purple panther, and a mysterious marking on his forehead, one that seems a lot like the 50 Blessings organization. When he snaps to it, the crew seems concerned, but move on, assuming that this is the stress of war. The next morning, Beard goes off on a suicide mission. While somehow managing to take over an entire power plant filled with Russian soldiers, he and Jacket barely make out by the skin of their teeth. Jacket, critically injured, saved by Beard. Beard gives them a photo of the two of them that Jacket will eventually throw off the balcony of a Russian mobster's penthouse. The final shot we get of Beard is him working a convenience store, the very first one you see him in, walking outside of San Francisco and getting nuked. This is the first, but not the last nuke in Hotline Miami 2. And it sets the stage for why these conflicts have been constantly appearing. While Beard does serve as a soldier, something that is inherently violent, I don't think the game criticizes him for it. In fact, I think the most telling moment of Beard's story is when his commander snaps and seemingly is the creator of 50 Blessings. I think the whole message of this story is that war will eventually leave scars, scars that continue to affect a culture for years and years and bring horrible events. 50 Blessings, a xenophobic organization that eventually leads to the downfall of both America and Russia, all starts from one squad pushed too far in a war. The final playable character is Richter, the very same Richter that shot Jacket in his own apartment. These missions are all played back to back in the intermission of Hotline Miami 2. Richter, to me, alongside Beard, is the most admirable character in the whole franchise. In fact, Dinaton seems to respect him more than nearly anyone else in the game. Richter signed up for the 50 Blessings organization, not knowing the full extent of their violence. When he found out what they do, he naturally did not want to participate anymore. The problem being, he plays caretaker to his very sick elderly mother. Eventually, 50 Blessings realized that if they just kept threatening him or his mother, that he would do whatever they asked him to do. Richter's entire mission is not about killing for any sake of his own, but killing to try to protect his own mother. Every mission is for her. More importantly, you finally get to see what happened after the events of Hotline 1. For some reason, Jacket seemingly spared Richter, who, after these events, went to prison. Eventually, through a prison riot, Richter escapes under the false identity of another police officer. The first thing he immediately does is rescue his mother and fly out to Hawaii. While playing as Evan, astute players might notice what seems like a small Easter egg. Outside the trial for Jacket, you can see the fans unmasked protesting, but you can also see Biker standing in the back doing nothing. Most people will write this off as a cheeky nod and nothing else, considering that when you reach the credits for the first time, you will likely never see Biker again. Not to mention, surely Biker can't be alive, given that Jacket is alive and, well, yeah. That is until score 13, where if you act like a true Hotline Miami veteran, you can unpromptly check your answering machine, where you have a message from someone who claims to have information for you, for a cash reward, of course. Only if you check your answering machine. After completing your mission, you will be taken to a secret scene called the Bar of Broken Heroes, where you can see almost everyone from the cast of the game. Even the hobo from Hotline 1 is here. Many parts of this don't make any sense. Beard is serving you years after he died. The hobo was slaughtered 2 years ago. You can walk into your friend Manny in the bathroom and he doesn't react to you at all. Hell, the fans are standing 10 feet away from the sun, who leads a mob that they're sworn to destroy. This is all clearly a non-canon Easter egg. Except the conversation between Evan and Biker. Biker, looking washed up now, sports a giant scar on his face, implying that the events of Hotline Miami 1 come from an unreliable narrator. It seems that Jacket didn't quite finish the job, and Biker managed to crawl his way out of Phone Home. Maybe he kept investigating 50 Blessings, or maybe didn't. It's not very clear. Many people assume that the reason Richter is sent to kill Jacket was because Biker lived. It's definitely an interesting theory, but I disagree. While Biker doesn't do much in the story, this Easter egg seems to mostly tie up any questions about the first game and where our second protagonist ended up if he lived. Biker fled Miami after the events of the first game, where he wandered the desert for 2 years, scared to ever come back. He said he met someone in the desert though, someone who took his fight away, someone who scared the shit out of him. This person was most likely Richard. The final character in Hotline Miami 2 I want to discuss is Richard, being the only one of the original Greek chorus to make the cut into Hotline Miami 2. He appears to look just like Jacket wearing the Richard mask, and acts exactly how he does in Miami 1, trying to force the main characters of the game to question why they are involved in such violent actions, and of course almost no one heeds his warning. While not being playable, he may still be the most important character in the story. He acts as a bad omen to every playable character. There's a constant trend of random people or even other playable characters putting on the mask to communicate paranormally to whoever you're playing as, sometimes even letting people see into the future. I also really love how Richard's sprite has a moving mouth and eyes on his mask, unlike the fans who don't, showing that this might not be a mask as much as it is who he is. The only two characters who kind of maybe don't meet Richard are Beard and Manny Pardo, but it's complicated. Pardo does have a nightmare featuring the Richard theme where he meets a puppet-like man who seems to represent his Miami Mutilator personality. In this same nightmare, you can see several packages that look almost exactly like the package the original Richard mask arrived in. To me, Richard did not show up to Pardo because he knew Pardo wouldn't care for him. He's too obsessed with himself and his Mutilator personality. Beard dies before Richard is ever a thing, both literally and spiritually. But he does see the birth of him, and the panicked freakout his colonel has, Richard's theme plays, possibly showing that the birth of 50 Blessings is the birth of Richard and the doom of everyone else. One of the most interesting scenes to me is the very last cutscene, with Richard and Richter. After Evan buys a plane ticket for Richter's mother to join Richter in Hawaii, we see the two of them sitting on a beach watching TV. That's when we learn that someone has assassinated the US and Russian president, most likely being Beard and Jacket's colonel in Hawaii. Richard then appears to Richter through his own mother, where they discuss how the good times never last, and that there is nothing to do but sit back and watch the world end. For once, Richard seems to have respect for another person. After completing the game, if you choose to start it over again, you're greeted with one last cutscene, where the whole cast plus Richard sits at a table getting ready to watch a film. One by one, each character is replaced with a corpse relating to how they die in the game. Richard only asks why everyone came back, all knowing they're just gonna die at the end anyways. The most interesting comments made all seem to relate back to what Richard actually is. Richter mistakenly believes him to be Jacket, to which Richard informs him he isn't. So that theory's out the window. Evan Wright asks who he is and is told the opposite of why you're writing your book, and something you'll never understand. And finally, Beard asks if they've met before, to which he says yes, and he's glad he remembers, and wishes it was under different circumstances. While there are many theories as to what Richard is, the best fitting one to me is futility. Every time he appears to a character, it is right past the point of no return. The fans right before their final mission, where they all die. Jacket during his coma dream, where he chases after the wrong people. Martin Brown during the talk show where he solidifies his obsession with violence and love for the role. Even when he offers advice, it is never followed through. It almost seems like he is taunting Jacket all throughout Miami 1, constantly giving him advice knowing that he's in a coma long past the point of help. He doesn't understand Manny because he strives both as a cop and a serial killer, trying to get pointless fame. Evan sacrifices almost everything in his life for a book that will never release and doesn't help anyone, a completely useless action that only hurts himself and his family. While many people assume that Jacket and Beard met when the Colonel first put on the Panther mask, and I think that is true, but I think that day is when the fate of the world is sealed. Every action in the series was pointless. It all caused a chain reaction that led to Colonel causing the end of what seems to be the world. Beard did meet Richard, and while he did serve in a pointless death march in Hawaii, all he ever wanted to do was own a small convenience store in Seattle. Nothing we did in the game truly mattered. It was all predetermined. We never got any choices. And yes, Richard is a stand-in for the developers. If you haven't figured it out by now, everyone in Hotline Miami 1 and 2 dies. Anyone lucky enough to make it to the end credits dies one by nuclear blasts dropped all around America. During the final credits, you hear for the first time ever in Hotline Miami history, a slow, acoustic song, You Are the Blood by the Castanets. Hotline Miami 2 suggests that violence is not the flaw of the individual, but the flaw of everyone, and that it can only lead to one self-destructed prophecy. For as convoluted as the story can seem, and how vague and how easy it is to read into everything, it really is as simple as violence is bad. We did it! The Hotline Miami video. Did not know it was going to take that long. Thought it would be about 3 or 4 months. But you know, almost a year later and we are done. So thank you if you've made it this far, watched all the way to the end, or if you skipped to the epilogue, I suppose. Thanks as well. That's cool. I have a couple new things I'm working on after this video. First things first, the Discord will finally be working. It should be linked in the description down below. I'm not much of a Discord person myself. I mostly use it for calls. But what we've got is pretty good. It's very basic, but I'd love to talk to some of you guys. Also, there will be links to other things like my Twitch that I stream at every once in a while. Instagram, you know, all the fun stuff. I really appreciate you guys that stuck around. I know my first video kind of blew up, and I wanted to kind of continue off of that and do my own thing a little bit, I suppose. Next videos I'm working on are pretty interesting. The next big video I want to do is Psycho Patrol R, the next game by the guy who made Cruelty Squad. Cruelty Squad is one of my favorite games. And I also love mecha games like Armored Core. So I think this game should be right up my alley, and I'm very excited. But that's probably going to take a while even for me to just beat it, and it's not even out yet. So that's probably going to be a little off in the future. But until then, I have another smaller, more experimental video I'm going to be doing that shouldn't take nearly as long. It's more of like a challenge video, I suppose. But hopefully you guys will stick around for that as well. Again, I appreciate everyone who stuck around, and I hope to see you guys again. So thank you very much.